Chosen one, listen carefully. This is not just another video, and this is not just another day. If you are hearing these words right now, understand this clearly: nothing is accidental. Every moment has been leading to this. Every tear you cried in silence, every time you were hurt, betrayed, misunderstood, or pushed aside, it was all seen. You didn't imagine the pain. You didn't exaggerate the wounds. What you went through was real, and it mattered. For a long time, you carried the weight while others walked away untouched. You stayed quiet while they spoke freely. You healed while they continued harming. But today, something has shifted. The balance has changed. The same people who hurt you, used you, or tried to break you are now facing the consequences of their actions. Not because you wished it, not because you chased revenge, but because truth always returns to settle accounts. You kept wondering why you had to endure so much while they seemed to move forward easily. But understand this: your delay was not denial. It was protection. While you were being strengthened, they were being exposed. While you were being prepared, they were planting seeds they didn't realize would grow back toward them. And now, the price is being paid. Quietly. Uncomfortably. In ways they never expected. This is not about celebration. It's about recognition. It's about realizing that what you survived was not meant to destroy you, but to position you. You didn't break because you were chosen to rise. And now, those who underestimated you are feeling the weight of their own actions, wishing, deep down, that they had simply left you alone. So stay present. Stay grounded. Because this message is not random. What you are sensing right now is alignment. The door is opening, and your season is turning. Before you get lost in this video, you must first do 3 things to connect with this energy. First, like the video. Then leave a comment saying, "Thank you God for protecting me." And finally, send your signal to the universe by subscribing to the channel, because what happens next is something you don't want to miss. You were hurt while staying quiet, and that mattered. You were hurt while staying quiet, and that mattered more than you realize. There were moments when you could have spoken up, when you could have explained your side, cried out for sympathy, or demanded answers, but you didn't. Not because you didn't feel the pain, but because something inside you chose endurance over noise. You carried emotions that had no outlet. You smiled in public while breaking in private. You showed up for responsibilities even when your heart felt heavy. Many people would have collapsed under that pressure, but you kept going, one step at a time, even when no one noticed. That kind of strength doesn't look dramatic, but it is rare. There were days when you replayed conversations in your head, wishing you had defended yourself better or spoken your truth more clearly. Yet you stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. You didn't want to fight every battle. You didn't want to explain yourself to people who were already committed to misunderstanding you. So you chose peace over proving a point. That choice cost you emotionally, but it also protected your integrity. You didn't lower yourself to match the chaos around you. While others mistook your silence for weakness, life was quietly working in your favor. Every situation you survived without becoming bitter strengthened your inner foundation. You learned how to sit with discomfort without letting it define you. You learned how to self-soothe, how to breathe through disappointment, how to trust yourself when external support was missing. These are skills no one applauds, yet they are the reason you're still standing today with clarity instead of resentment. Your quiet endurance also taught you discernment. You began to notice who listened and who ignored, who showed up and who disappeared. Without confrontation, without accusations, you saw people for who they truly were. That awareness didn't harden your heart, it sharpened your understanding. You became more selective with your energy, more careful with your trust, and more honest with yourself. That growth came directly from the pain you didn't publicize. What matters most is this: staying quiet did not mean you stayed small. It meant you were growing inwardly before life allowed you to grow outwardly. Strength built in silence lasts longer than strength built for display. And now, when you speak, or even when you don't, your presence carries weight. People sense it. Life responds to it. What you survived quietly became the foundation of the unshakable person you are becoming. Not everyone who smiled at you had clean intentions. Not everyone who smiled at you had clean intentions, and realizing this can feel uncomfortable at first. You genuinely believed in people. You showed up with honesty, warmth, and loyalty, assuming others were coming from the same place. You didn't calculate every interaction or look for hidden motives. You gave because that's who you are. But over time, You began to notice small shifts, subtle changes in tone, effort, and presence, that made you question why certain relationships felt draining instead of supportive. That awareness didn't come from suspicion, it came from experience. Some people stayed close to you not because they valued you deeply, but because they benefited from your consistency. Your kindness made things easier for them. Your listening ear gave them comfort. Your loyalty provided stability. As long as you were giving freely, everything felt fine on the surface. But the moment you started pulling back, setting boundaries, conserving energy, or simply choosing yourself, the dynamic changed. Suddenly, the warmth faded. The smiles felt forced. The effort became one-sided. That shift wasn't coincidence, it was clarity. You may have wondered if you did something wrong when those relationships began to distance themselves. You may have replayed conversations, searching for a mistake. But the truth is simpler and kinder than self-blame. When you stopped overextending, you stopped serving a role they depended on. And when a relationship only functions as long as you give more than you receive, it's not balanced, it's extractive. Recognizing that is not selfish, it's necessary for growth. Distance didn't arrive to punish you or isolate you. It arrived to protect you from further emotional exhaustion. Sometimes life removes people gently, not with dramatic endings, but with gradual space. That space allows you to see things more clearly without emotional noise. You begin to notice how peaceful it feels when you're not constantly adjusting yourself to keep others comfortable. You realize how much energy you were spending trying to maintain connections that weren't meant to last. As those connections faded, something else quietly strengthened you. You learn that loyalty doesn't mean self-sacrifice. You learn that kindness doesn't require overgiving. You learn that genuine relationships don't disappear when you set healthy boundaries. These lessons didn't make you colder, they made you wiser. You became more intentional about where your time, care, and trust were placed. What's important to understand is that not everyone who walked away was meant to stay. Some people were present for a season, not a lifetime. Their role was to teach you discernment, not to walk with you forever. Letting go of them doesn't erase the good moments, it simply honors the truth of what the relationship was and what it wasn't. Now, as you move forward, you carry a clearer sense of who deserves access to you. You no longer chase explanations or try to convince people to understand your worth. You allow distance to do its work. And in that space, you make room for connections that are mutual, supportive, and honest. What left was never meant to sustain you. What remains, and what's coming, will feel lighter, healthier, and real. You didn't need revenge because truth moves on its own. Not everyone who smiled at you had clean intentions, and realizing that was part of your awakening. For a long time, you believed that closeness meant care and that familiarity meant loyalty. You gave people access to your time, your emotions, your support, and your kindness without keeping score. You assumed others were operating from the same honest place you were? But slowly, patterns started to emerge. You noticed how some people only reached out when they needed something. You noticed how your presence was appreciated only when it was convenient. These realizations didn't come suddenly, they arrived quietly, through small moments that didn't sit right in your spirit. Some people were drawn to you not because they valued you, but because they benefited from you. Your energy made rooms lighter. Your loyalty made others feel secure. Your kindness filled gaps they didn't know how to fill themselves. But instead of respecting that, they consumed it. And the hardest part was that they smiled while doing it. They spoke kindly, stayed close, and acted supportive, yet their actions lacked depth when it truly mattered. That kind of realization hurts deeply, because it challenges your belief in connection itself. The shift began the moment you stopped overgiving. Not dramatically, not with announcements, but subtly. You started setting boundaries without explaining them. You conserved your energy. You said no without guilt. And that's when behavior changed. People who once praised you became distant. Those who relied on you grew uncomfortable. Some even tried to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. That reaction was the truth revealing itself. It showed you who was attached to you, and who was attached to what you provided. It's important to understand this clearly. Their change was not caused by you becoming cold. It was caused by you becoming aware. You didn't suddenly turn selfish. You simply stopped abandoning yourself for the comfort of others. When someone only values you for what you give, they struggle when you choose balance. That discomfort is not your responsibility. It's the natural response to losing access to something they took for granted. Distance followed, and at first it felt like loss. You questioned whether you did something wrong. You replayed interactions in your mind. But over time, clarity replaced confusion. You realized that distance wasn't punishment, it was protection. It created space for you to breathe, to heal, and to reconnect with yourself. In that space, your intuition grew stronger. You learned to sense sincerity instead of assuming it. You learned that not everyone who stays close deserves intimacy. What changed you the most was not the betrayal itself, but the lesson it carried. You stopped forcing bonds. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped chasing validation from people who couldn't see you fully. That growth didn't make you bitter, it made you discerning. You didn't lose your kindness, you learned where to place it. Now, you move differently. You listen more. You observe patterns. You trust actions over words. And because of that, your circle is smaller, but it's cleaner. The smiles around you now feel lighter, more genuine, more grounded. Distance removed what trained you, not what defined you. And that's how you know it happened for your protection, not your punishment. You didn't need revenge because truth moves on its own, and that's what makes this moment powerful. There were times when you could have reacted differently. Times when anger would have been justified. Times when retaliation would have felt satisfying. But something inside you chose restraint. You didn't chase payback. You didn't expose people publicly. You didn't try to control outcomes. Instead, you focused on moving forward with honesty, even when it felt unfair. That choice wasn't easy, but it preserved something essential, your peace. You understood, even if only subconsciously, that revenge ties you to the very situation you're trying to escape. It keeps your energy focused on the past. So instead of turning around to fight, you kept walking. You invested in your growth. You stayed aligned with your values. You let life unfold without forcing justice. That decision didn't make you passive, it made you free. At first, it looked like nothing was happening. People who hurt you seemed untouched. Situations felt unresolved. But truth doesn't rush. It settles. It works quietly, rearranging circumstances, revealing intentions, and placing people in situations that reflect their choices. What's happening now didn't come from your effort, it came from alignment. When you step out of the way, truth has room to act. The power of natural consequences is that they arrive without accusation. No one needs to point fingers. No explanations are required. People begin to experience the results of their actions through their own lives. Relationships strain. Patterns repeat. Inner unrest grows. And when that happens, you're not involved. You're not carrying guilt, resentment, or responsibility. Your hands are clean, and your heart is light. This is why justice arriving without your involvement feels different. There's no bitterness attached to it. No lingering anger. Just understanding. You see clearly now that what you endured wasn't ignored, it was delayed resolution. And delay doesn't mean denial. It means timing. Timing that allowed you to grow strong enough not to be consumed by the outcome. You also gained something priceless through this process, self-respect. You proved to yourself that you don't need to compromise your integrity to be validated. You don't need to harm others to heal yourself. That realization changed how you see power. Power is no longer loud or reactive. It's calm. It's grounded. It trusts that truth doesn't need defense, it needs space. Now, as consequences unfold naturally, you're not celebrating. You're observing. You're learning. You're moving forward without weight. What resolved itself without your interference leaves no emotional residue. No regret. No shame. Only clarity. And that clarity confirms what you already know. Choosing honesty over revenge was not weakness, it was wisdom guiding you exactly where you needed to be. Their peace was temporary, yours was delayed, but real. Their peace was temporary, yours was delayed, but real, and this is something many people don't understand until time reveals it. For a long while, it may have looked like they moved on effortlessly. They laughed freely, posted happy moments, spoke confidently, and appeared untouched by what happened. From the outside, it felt unfair. You questioned why the ones who caused pain seemed so comfortable while you were left to process the damage quietly. But what you were seeing was only the surface, not the foundation underneath. Peace that comes from avoidance, denial, or stepping over others is not true peace. It's distraction. It survives only as long as nothing challenges it. People can smile while unresolved guilt sits quietly in the background. They can appear successful while carrying inner unrest they refuse to face. That kind of peace depends on constant noise, constant movement, validation, or control, to keep cracks from showing. And eventually, life slows them down enough for those cracks to become impossible to ignore. Your journey looked different. You didn't rush into pretending everything was fine. You sat with discomfort. You allowed yourself to feel the confusion, the sadness, the disappointment. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't fast. There were moments when you wished you could just move on the way others seemed to. But instead of covering wounds, you chose to heal them. That choice delayed your peace, but it also deepened it. While they were escaping inward work, you were doing it. You questioned patterns. You reflected on boundaries. You learned where you overgave, where you ignored your intuition, and where you needed to grow. None of this felt peaceful at the time. In fact, it felt heavy. But that heaviness was part of reconstruction. You weren't avoiding pain, you were processing it. And that makes all the difference. Real peace isn't loud. It doesn't need to be displayed or defended. It settles into you gradually. One day, you realize you're no longer replaying conversations. Another day, you notice that certain names don't trigger emotions anymore. Slowly, you stop feeling the urge to explain yourself or prove anything. That's when peace becomes real, not because life is perfect, but because your inner world is no longer at war. The key difference is stability. Temporary peace collapses under pressure. It panics when control is lost. It reacts when attention fades. Your peace, on the other hand, grows stronger with time. It doesn't depend on others' behavior. It doesn't break when things don't go as planned. It's rooted in self-trust, clarity, and acceptance. And once that kind of peace settles in, it stays. Now, the roles quietly reverse. The ones who rushed past healing may find themselves unsettled later, wondering why restlessness follows them despite their achievements. Meanwhile, you move forward calmly, grounded, and emotionally lighter. No rush. No performance. Just quiet confidence. What you built slowly will last longer than what was built quickly. Your peace may have arrived later, but it arrived whole, and it's here to stay. You were being prepared while they were being exposed. Not every smile you received came from a genuine place, and realizing this can feel uncomfortable at first. Some people entered your life not because they cared about you deeply, but because they benefited from what you naturally gave, your kindness, your time, your loyalty, your emotional support. You were someone who listened without judging, helped without keeping score, and stayed even when things became inconvenient. That kind of energy attracts people, but not all of them come with honest intentions. At the beginning, everything felt normal. Conversations flowed, laughter came easily, and you believed the connection was mutual. You assumed people valued you the same way you value them. But over time, small signs started appearing. Maybe they only reached out when they needed something. Maybe your problems were ignored while theirs were always urgent. You felt drained after interactions but couldn't explain why. Still, you kept giving, because that's who you are. The shift happened when you finally started choosing yourself. You didn't announce it. You didn't make a dramatic exit. You simply stopped overextending. You stopped explaining yourself endlessly. You stopped pouring energy into places that never poured back. And that's when the truth surfaced. Some people changed their tone. Some became distant. Some grew cold or defensive. That change wasn't because you did something wrong, it was because the dynamic had changed. When you stopped giving what drained you, you unknowingly removed the benefit they were receiving. And once the benefit disappeared, so did their interest. That realization can hurt, but it also brings clarity. It shows you that the problem was never your worth, it was their intention. You were valuable the entire time, they just valued what you provided more than who you were. Distance entered your life not as punishment, but as protection. It created space for you to breathe again. It helped you see relationships more clearly. You started understanding that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. You learned that being kind doesn't mean being available to everyone. Boundaries didn't make you cold, they made you balanced. With distance came peace. Not the loud kind, but a calm sense of relief. You no longer had to perform, explain, or overgive. You didn't feel guilty for resting. You didn't feel obligated to fix everything. And slowly, you began trusting yourself more than external validation. This experience didn't harden your heart, it refined it. You didn't stop being kind, you became selective. You didn't stop loving, you learned discernment. And that's growth. The smiles that remain around you now feel different, lighter, more genuine, more mutual. And the ones that faded? They taught you a lesson you'll never forget: not everyone who smiles is meant to stay. You didn't need revenge because truth moves on its own. There were moments when you could have fought back. Moments when you could have explained your side, exposed lies, or demanded accountability. You had every reason to seek revenge, to prove people wrong, or to make them feel the pain they caused you. But you didn't. Instead, you chose something quieter and far more powerful. You chose to keep moving forward with honesty. That decision wasn't easy. There were nights when anger surfaced, when unfairness felt unbearable. You questioned why you had to stay calm while others seemed untouched by consequences. But even then, something inside you refused to act from bitterness. You understood, maybe without words, that revenge would only tie you emotionally to the very situation you were trying to escape. So you focused on yourself. You showed up to your life with integrity. You didn't twist the truth to look better. You didn't manipulate outcomes. You simply stayed real. That choice mattered more than you knew. Because when truth is consistent, it doesn't need defense, it reveals itself naturally. What's happening now feels powerful because you didn't interfere with the process. You didn't force justice, you allowed it. And when consequences arrive without your involvement, they land differently. There's no guilt on your heart. No regret about words spoken in anger. No shame about actions taken in haste. You stayed clean in intention, and that protected your peace. People are now facing outcomes they didn't expect. Situations are unfolding in ways you couldn't have planned even if you tried. And the most important part? You're not responsible for it. Life handled it. Truth handled it. You're just witnessing the results. This kind of justice feels calm, not chaotic. It doesn't require celebration or explanation. It simply restores balance. You can sleep at night knowing you didn't lose yourself trying to win. You didn't sacrifice your values for temporary satisfaction. The shift feels quiet, but it's irreversible. The shift feels quiet, but it is irreversible, and that's what makes it powerful. Nothing dramatic announced this change. There was no big argument, no final confrontation, no moment where everything exploded and reset. Instead, the shift happened gently, almost unnoticed at first. One day you realized you weren't reacting the same way anymore. Things that once triggered anxiety, anger, or sadness suddenly felt distant. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped carrying what was never yours to hold in the first place. That calm didn't come from avoidance, it came from understanding. You might remember how earlier every small situation felt heavy. A message, a memory, a tone in someone's voice could disturb your entire day. Your mind stayed busy replaying scenarios, questioning yourself, or preparing emotional defenses. But now, there's space. Space between what happens and how you respond. That pause is the clearest sign that something inside you has settled. You're no longer living in constant alert mode. Your nervous system has finally exhaled after being tense for far too long. This quiet shift also shows up in how you deal with people. You don't feel the urge to explain yourself repeatedly. You don't feel pulled into unnecessary debates. You don't feel responsible for fixing how others feel about you. That doesn't mean you've become cold, it means you've become clear. You've learned that clarity is kinder than chaos, and peace doesn't require permission. The need to be understood by everyone has faded, because you finally understand yourself. What's important to realize is that irreversible changes often arrive silently. Loud changes are usually unstable. They depend on emotion, reaction, and external validation. But quiet changes come from inner alignment. They don't need witnesses. They don't need approval. Once you reach this state, you can't go back to how things were before, not because you don't want to, but because your awareness won't allow it. You've seen too much, learned too much, and healed too deeply to pretend otherwise. Silence, in this phase, is not emptiness. It's completion. It means the lesson has been integrated, not just understood intellectually. You're no longer trying to convince yourself that you're okay, you actually are. And that's why there's less need to talk about it. When something is unresolved, it keeps demanding attention. When it's settled, it rests quietly in the background while you move forward. You may notice that others respond differently to you now. Some feel confused because they no longer get the same reaction from you. Some feel distant because they can't access you emotionally the way they used to. And some feel respect without understanding why. That's because your energy has changed, not your personality. You're still you, just without the weight, the noise, and the constant self-doubt. This is the kind of shift that doesn't announce itself but changes everything. It affects how you walk, how you speak, how you choose, and how you rest. And once it happens, it doesn't reverse. You don't unlearn peace. You don't forget clarity. You don't miss chaos once you've tasted stability. Silence doesn't mean nothing is happening, it means something important has already finished. They feel regret, not because you spoke, but because you changed. They feel regret, not because you spoke, but because you changed. There was a time when you might have thought that if you just explained yourself better, if you just said the right words, people would finally understand you. But life showed you something deeper. Real realization doesn't come from arguments or explanations, it comes from change. When you stopped reacting the way you used to, when you stopped chasing validation, something shifted. Your silence became noticeable. Your absence became loud. And that's when reflection started for them. Your growth didn't come with announcements. You didn't send messages explaining how much you've healed. You didn't post speeches about boundaries or lessons learned. You simply became different. You became calmer in situations that once triggered you. You stopped overgiving. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never listened. That quiet transformation did more than any confrontation ever could. It forced people to look at themselves instead of blaming you. Your absence created awareness in a way your presence never could. When you were always available, always forgiving, always understanding, people took that for granted. They assumed you would always be there, no matter how they treated you. But when you stepped back, not angrily, not dramatically, just peacefully, they felt the space you left behind. In that space, they started noticing what they lost. Not because you punished them, but because you chose yourself. Your calm unsettled them more than anger ever would. Anger gives people something to react against. Calm gives them nothing to fight, and that's uncomfortable. When you didn't argue back, when you didn't defend yourself, when you didn't chase closure, it left them alone with their thoughts. And that's where regret grows, not in chaos, but in quiet moments when there's no distraction from truth. Some of them now replay conversations in their head. They remember moments they dismissed you, overlooked you, or assumed you'd always stay. They notice how you don't respond the same way anymore. How you don't need their approval. How you don't bend to keep peace. That realization hits slowly, but deeply. It's not dramatic regret, it's subtle, lingering, and heavy. What's important to understand is this: the regret is not your responsibility. You didn't change to teach them a lesson. You changed to survive, to heal, to protect your peace. Any awareness they gained is a side effect of your growth, not the purpose of it. You didn't demand respect, you embodied self-respect. And that's the difference. You no longer seek validation from the same places. You no longer chase people who don't meet you halfway. You no longer need apologies to move forward. That independence is what makes people rethink their past behavior. Because they realize too late that access to you is a privilege, not a guarantee. And here's the quiet truth: not everyone will admit their regret out loud. Some will never apologize. Some will smile and pretend nothing changed. But internally, they know. Life has a way of making people feel the weight of missed chances without saying a word. Your role now is not to look back and analyze who regrets what. Your role is to keep moving forward as the person you've become. Let your peace stay intact. Let your growth continue. The change you made was real, and that's why the impact is lasting. You are no longer meant to explain your side. You are no longer meant to explain your side, and this shift may feel unfamiliar at first, but it is one of the clearest signs of inner growth. There was a time when you felt a strong urge to clarify misunderstandings, to defend your intentions, and to make sure people knew the truth about you. You replayed conversations in your head, imagining better responses, stronger explanations, and moments where you could finally be understood. That phase was exhausting, not because you were wrong, but because you were trying to convince people who were never truly listening. Now, something inside you has softened, and strengthened at the same time. The need to explain is slowly fading, and that's not weakness. It's wisdom settling in. What's happening is that you're beginning to trust reality more than words. You've realized that people who genuinely care don't need long explanations, and people who don't care will twist even the clearest ones. This understanding brings relief. You're no longer waking up with the pressure to fix narratives or control perceptions. Instead, you're letting your actions, consistency, and calm speak quietly for you. And that kind of communication doesn't argue, it demonstrates. It allows truth to show itself over time, without force. Another reason explanations are falling away is because life itself has started responding on your behalf. Situations are unfolding in ways that reveal who you are and what you stood for, without you having to say a word. Patterns are becoming obvious. Outcomes are aligning. People are noticing changes not because you announce them, but because they can feel them. When life begins to validate you, verbal defense becomes unnecessary. Proof carries more weight than persuasion ever could. You're also learning that not every misunderstanding needs correction. Some things are meant to be left as they are. When you stop chasing understanding from the wrong places, you create space for peace. You're no longer spending emotional energy trying to manage how you're perceived. That energy is now being redirected toward growth, stability, and presence. This is why you feel calmer, less tense, less reactive. You're not suppressing yourself, you're conserving yourself. There's also maturity in accepting that some people will never see your side, and that's okay. Their perspective does not define your worth or your future. You don't need universal agreement to move forward. You only need alignment with your own values. Once you internalize this, explanations start to feel unnecessary, even heavy. Silence becomes lighter than justification. Distance becomes healthier than debate. What's important to understand is that this silence is not avoidance. It's closure without confrontation. It's knowing that the truth doesn't disappear just because you stop talking about it. In fact, truth often becomes clearer when it's not surrounded by noise. People eventually connect the dots on their own. And if they don't, your life will still move forward without interruption. This stage you're in now is about allowing momentum to carry you. You're trusting timing instead of urgency, reality instead of reaction. And that trust is freeing. You no longer need to explain your side because your life is becoming the explanation. Quietly. Naturally. Completely. This is not the end of your journey, it's the clearing of the path. This is not the end of your journey, it is the clearing of the path, and that difference matters more than it seems. What you are experiencing right now may feel intense, emotional, or even confusing, but it is not a final destination. It is a release phase. Think of it like finally setting down a heavy bag you carried for far too long. You're not being rewarded yet, you're being freed. Freed from confusion that kept you second-guessing yourself. Freed from emotional weight that made simple things feel exhausting. Freed from cycles that repeated no matter how hard you tried to change them. This stage is about making space, not about arriving somewhere new just yet. For a long time, you were moving forward while dragging unresolved emotions behind you. Old hurts, unanswered questions, lingering attachments, and unspoken disappointments kept resurfacing. You tried to heal while still standing in environments that kept reopening the same wounds. Now, those patterns are breaking. Not because you forced them to, but because you outgrew them. When something no longer fits your inner state, it naturally falls away. That's not loss, it's alignment correcting itself. You may notice that situations which once felt complicated are suddenly becoming simple. Decisions don't require endless overthinking anymore. People reveal themselves more clearly. You no longer feel pulled in 10 emotional directions at once. That's the sign of a cleared path. When clutter is removed, direction becomes obvious. You're not confused because you're lost, you were confused because too much was blocking your view. Now, the fog is lifting. This clearing can feel uncomfortable because it removes familiarity. Even painful cycles can feel normal when they've lasted a long time. Letting them go creates a strange quiet, almost like standing in an empty room after years of noise. But that quiet is not emptiness, it's readiness. It's the pause before life introduces something new that actually matches who you are now, not who you were when you were surviving. What's important to understand is that nothing meaningful is being taken from you in this phase. Only what was draining, confusing, or misaligned is being removed. You're not losing momentum, you're gaining clarity. And clarity always makes movement smoother. That's why what comes next will feel easier, not because life suddenly has no challenges, but because you'll be moving without internal resistance. You're also learning to trust the process instead of fighting it. Earlier, you may have tried to control outcomes, fix people, or hold situations together out of fear of starting over. Now, you're allowing life to rearrange itself without constant interference. That trust is powerful. It tells the universe you're ready for stability, not chaos disguised as excitement. As the path clears, your energy changes. You become more present, more grounded, more selective. You stop chasing closure and start accepting completion. You stop asking why did this happen? And start feeling this is over. That shift creates momentum you don't even have to push. Opportunities begin to align naturally because there's finally room for them to enter. You are protected to move forward without looking back. You are protected to move forward without looking back, and this is something your soul already understands, even if your mind is still catching up. There was a time when you kept turning around emotionally, replaying old moments, wondering if you should have acted differently, spoken differently, trusted differently. That phase is ending now. Not because you suddenly forgot the past, but because the past has finished teaching you what it needed to teach. Every experience gave you clarity, strength, and awareness. There is no unfinished lesson behind you anymore, which is why the pull to revisit old situations is fading naturally. What's important to understand is that moving forward doesn't require dramatic closure or final conversations. Some chapters end without an explanation, and that doesn't mean they're incomplete. It means they've done their job. You learn how to stand up for yourself internally. You learned where your boundaries are. You learn what drains you and what nourishes you. Once those lessons are integrated, life quietly removes the need to go back. You're not avoiding the past, you've simply outgrown it. Protection doesn't always look like walls or warnings. Sometimes protection looks like losing interest in what once consumed you. You're no longer triggered the same way. Certain names, memories, or places don't hold the emotional charge they used to. That's not numbness, it's healing. It's a sign that your nervous system is settling, that your heart feels safe enough to stop scanning for danger. This inner safety is what allows you to move forward without fear of repeating old cycles. Another sign of protection is how your focus is shifting. You're thinking more about where you're going than where you've been. You're asking better questions, making calmer decisions, and choosing stability over intensity. This doesn't mean life will be perfect from here on, but it does mean you're better equipped to handle what comes next. You're no longer reacting from old wounds, you're responding from awareness. That changes everything. Effort meeting timing is a powerful place to be. In the past, you may have worked hard but felt blocked, unseen, or delayed. Now, things begin to align more smoothly, not because you're doing more, but because you're doing what fits you. You're no longer forcing doors that were never meant to open. You're recognizing opportunities that match your energy and walking through them without resistance. When timing meets effort, progress feels natural instead of exhausting. Favor doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up as peace in your decisions, clarity in your direction, and a quiet confidence that you're on the right path. You don't need constant reassurance anymore. You trust yourself. That trust is the result of everything you survived and learned. It's also the reason you don't need to look back for validation or answers. Staying grounded now is essential. Grounded doesn't mean stagnant, it means present. It means appreciating where you are while moving toward what's next. Gratitude keeps you aligned, not attached. And moving forward doesn't require rushing. It requires consistency, honesty with yourself, and faith in the process. You are protected not because nothing will ever challenge you again, but because you now know how to move through challenges without losing yourself. The path ahead is open, and you are ready to walk it, without regret, without fear, and without looking back. Chosen one, if this message resonated with you, it's because something has already shifted. Before you continue, take a moment to like the video, comment "Thank you God for protecting me," and subscribe to the channel, because what's coming next will confirm everything you're